Okay, so just like that. Shit. Hello champions, it's Lord Voultar, and today we are going to install the Hi-Def NES kit into an AV Famicom. Now before we get started, I just want to say, and be very clear on this, I highly suggest that you have some competent desoldering tool in your tool repertoire. Something like a Heiko 808. Unless you have considerable soldering or desoldering experience, using a mechanical pump to clear these joints for the PPU and CPU, you're going to find probably some hair-pulling agony with that. So unless this isn't your first desoldering rodeo, get a good tool. Get a good tool and save yourself the headache. So with that being said, let's flip this baby around and let's start ripping some screws. Okay, now by default, there should be an RF shield right here that is anchored by these 3 screws. But evidently someone's gotten in here and they've just been playing around. So when you open yours up, you'll probably see the shield. Here you don't. But ultimately we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 screws that we need to rip out of this thing in order to totally separate the main board from the bottom casing. So let's do that really fast. Alrighty. And she comes out just like that. So here's the main board. Now this system specifically is getting a cap kit installation, and yeah, that's the only extra here. So before I get into any of the high def into any of the high def prep, I'm going to go ahead and cap this system and do the little bit of prep work for that. So in order to do that, what we need to do is we need to remove these 2 screws. These 2 screws are the anchors for the heatsink for the linear regulator. There's a 7805 in there. So we'll remove those 2, and we'll remove the screw from the 7805 so we can pull the heatsink and we can gain access to the power filter cap here. So let's do that. Beautiful. Okay, so I'm going to recap this bad boy, starting with the power filter cap. So here we go. So we're looking at the component legs for the capacitor on the bottom layer of the main board here. So what I want to do is I want to show you how I will clear these through holes with a Heiko 808 in order to remove this capacitor and install another one. So that I start by just simply taking the tip. It's gone molten. I want to give it a little swivel to make sure that we truly are free, and then I'm going to apply the suction apparatus. Beautifully cleared. So again, apply it, it'll go molten. Once it goes molten, give it a little swivel, and there you have it. 2 beautifully clear joints. You don't want to be premature on this. When you introduce the tip of your desoldering tool to the solder and to the joint itself, wait for it to go molten. After it goes molten, you'll let the weight of the tool drop down onto the pad. You're not forcing the tool down onto the pad. Gravity will do that work for you. So once the tool drops down and the solder is fully molten, give it a swivel. If it swivels freely, that you know that you are the solder is in a totally plastic state and it's ready to be sucked out of there. But if it gives you any trouble and it doesn't want to swivel freely, your joint's not ready to be evacuated. So just a few things to keep in mind there. So we're looking at the top side of the board where we just evacuated that power filter capacitor. And you're going to see some markings here. You see a plus sign and a minus sign. These are just reference points for the actual polarity of the capacitor or how it should be installed. So knowing that, we can just come right in here and put her in. Okay, so we've inserted the capacitor, and you've noticed that I've kind of spread the legs out a little bit just to create some tension to hold that little girl in place. So now that we've done that, we're just going to come in with our iron here. And we're just going to apply some solder and reconstitute these joints. So while we have the heatsink off for the 7805, we actually need to remove the 7805. The Hi-Def NES supplies power to the NES mainboard, so there's no reason to have this linear regulator on there anymore. So I'm just going to flip this sucker around, remove it, and get it ready. And if you do that just right, she'll fall right out. So while we still have the heatsink off, there's one final thing that we can do for preparation of the Hi-Def NES kit. This is the power side of things. So as you can see here, we have the area where we just lifted the 7805 linear regulator. We've got an input, we've got a ground, and we've got an output. Now this I for input, this is the power coming in from the DC input jack. So your 9 or 10 volt DC power adapter, that supply is fed into this input. Now ground is obviously self-explanatory, that's just the ground. Output, however, this is the 5 volt rail of the 7805. So when we're attaching power from the Hi-Def NES to the NES mainboard or Famicom mainboard, its voltage supply, we want to send the DC power from the jack to the mainboard of the Hi-Def NES kit. So we'll want to solder power to the input side of the 7805, and of course ground is ground. But it's important to note that in order to get power from your wall wart to the Hi-Def NES's power side, you have to grab the power jack from the input side of the 7805. So remember, we're looking at the bottom side of the board where we just removed the 7805. The pad to your left, that is the input. Center pad is ground. The pad on the far right, or these through-hole vias, I should say, the one on the far right is the 5 volt output. We don't care about the 5 volt output because we're not using the 7805 anymore. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a pre-prepped 2-wire, 2-conductor piece of ribbon cable. I'm just going to insert it here, like so. And yes, these have been pre-tinned and they have been flexed up a bit. And I've loaded my tip, the tip on my iron loaded up with some solder here. Okay, so when I have this into position where I want it, which is about right there, I'm going to come in with the iron, like so. I'm just going to prep these pads. I'm not making a secure joint here. I'm just tacking them in. So now that they're tacked in, my hand is free. My hand is free, and I can come in here, and I can bring some solder in with my free hand, just like this. And I can make some really, whoops, camera's getting in my way, people. There we are, and I can make some really nice joints just like that. So now that we have on the NES side, we've got power and ground taken care of. We don't have to worry about this anymore. When we get closer to the end of the installation, we'll take the opposite side of this cable and we'll just wire it into the Hi-Def NES, and that's really all there is to that. So as far as board preparation goes for the Hi-Def NES kit, we've almost done everything that we need to do with the exception of 2 things. In this area of the board we have the video transistor for the composite video, and we have a 220 microfarad capacitor, which is basically the DC blocker for the composite video output. So we'll simply need to bend this capacitor and flatten it down against the board, and we'll need to remove and bridge the PNP transistor here so that we can just use the one that's on the transistor that's on the PPU interposer. So I'm going to zoom in and we're going to do that right now. So here's the 220 microfarad capacitor that must be laid flat against the board in order for the interposer to clear. Now, if during the manufacturing process they may have given you enough slack just to bend the sucker down, otherwise if they didn't, you'll need to flip the board around, heat both of the component legs so you can slightly pull this capacitor out of the board just a bit and give you enough slack to flatten it against the board. But I think in this case we're pretty lucky. So that's that simple. Now that we've got the capacitor out of the way, let's go to the transistor here. We're going to flip the board on the flip it on its other side, and we're going to remove this sucker, and we're going to jump 2 sections here. So let's do that. Okay guys, so removing the P&P video transistor is business as usual, much like anything else, excuse me, and much like we removing that power filter capacitor that I did as an example for you. So let's just hit this really fast. Okay. And it's that simple. It's that simple. Remember, the reason we're removing this transistor from the board is because this transistor already exists on the PPU's interposer. So, you know, we're overriding this, but at the same time, we need to restore that circuit path, and we do that by jumping the base and the base and the emitter from this transistor here. So what I like to do is I'll take a component leg, like a capacitor that I've capped. That cut component leg I'll take and I'll shape it so that it'll make a nice little jumper conductor. And what I'll do is I'll just simply insert it in there just like that. Press it down just a bit here. Make sure it doesn't short to the make sure that does not short to the collector pin, which is the center pad there, and solder that in, and you've just totally restored your default video circuit. So that's all that's necessary there. So we have done all of the board preparations necessary in order to get right into the real installation of this kit. So we're at the point where we're at the real hurdle of the install of this thing, at least for a lot of people, and that is the extraction of the PPU and the extraction of the CPU. Now, I'm going to do one of these in real time so I can go over some good techniques in order to get that nice, clean chip extraction. The other one I'll do at a accelerated speed. Probably ludicrous speed, but I believe I will do the PPU in real time because there are some considerations to be made. The extension pins here, there's some pretty good ground plane on here that can easily be heat soaked. And what happens is when you try to desolder to some of these pins that are attached to the ground plane, they're just going to soak a lot of your heat away. So I want to show you some really simple things that will help you get nice cleared vias throughout all of the conductors here. You've got 40 pins on this chip. This is a 40 pin package. So we'll go over some really quick stuff, and I'll try to be fairly thorough in that so you get an idea of what you should be doing in order to get that nice clean pull of this. So let's get right to it. We'll flip this around, we'll do some board prep, and I'll talk about it. So clean extraction is all about preparation, and what I do to prep these, to prep the PPU and CPU for their extraction is just as follows. So there's a nice bead of no clean flux. Here's my nice knife tip. I'm going to come here with some fresh solder. This is a part of a dragging technique that I like to use. So I'm just going to come right in here, and I'm going to introduce fresh solder to all of these joints here, just like this. A nice slow, excuse me, a nice slow flow all the way down. All the way down. Nice and slow, nice and slow, nice and slow. Just like that. And so that's one side. Let's come to the other side. Again, another bead of no clean. Okay, we'll clean our knife end tip here. We'll come to the opposite side just like this. Nice and slow, all the way down. Steady movement, no jerkiness, nice and slow. Wetting all these joints. Go back if you got a bridge. No problem. Nice and slow. We're going to thoroughly wet all layers here. So there we have that. Now, it's desoldering time. Now, I typically don't do any desoldering with the board laying flat. I actually hold the board up, in my hand, when I desolder. But a couple of things here. So we've already prepped these pins with some fresh clean solder. That'll create more thermal mass, so these joints will clean a lot easier. Remember that when we place when we position the tip of our iron or our desoldering nozzle down on these pins, we're not applying force. We're letting gravity do the work. So we'll put the nozzle over the joint. We'll wait just a second. We'll let the nozzle drop down onto the joint. Then we'll do a very quick swivel to make sure that we have full molten solder under our nozzle, and then we'll evacuate it. So let's do it. Okay, now when you clear those joints like that, the next step of this is going to be, you just take your fingers like you're pinching, and just run your finger up and down the pins just like this, up and down the pins, up and down the pins. This will break up any residual if any residual's left. So we'll come here, sorry if I lose focus, go up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down, and then we'll turn this thing around and we'll take a look at everything. Now, it might take some practice. You may need to go back over some of those pins that are attached to ground plane, like down here, the EXT 1 through 4. These are attached to the ground plane, so they'll heat soak very easily, and you may have difficulty removing those. But if you do, just go back, just inspect the joints, apply a little more solder, go back and hit it again. It'll come right out. After you do a few of these and you get some good experience, or you do a lot of these, you'll be able to get these out in one swing, and it's a walk in the park. But here's the most important thing I can say about removing either the CPU or the PPU, or with any IC, with any DIP package that you're removing. That's, you know, any through-hole technology here. You see a lot of people, they'll use chip pullers, and, you know, they'll come in here and they'll pry, and they'll take something and they'll mechanically force the damn thing out. I don't believe in that. That's how people lift vias. That's how people lift plated shit. It's no good. Don't do it. Be a champion. Do it this way. If you remember just a second ago, I had you go with your fingers and wiggle each pin to break up any residual solder in the through-hole plating. Well, that's all you really need to do. And if you've done this correctly, and this has been desoldered properly, but at least by my standard of properly, there's only one test that you need to do to ensure that this baby is ready to come out with no more prep work needed. It's called the finger push test. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your index finger on each side, and you're going to put your fingers on the pins underneath the chip. And when you do that, you're going to push up like you're pushing the pins through the board. And look at that. Look at that. See, all the pins are coming up, and it should only take hand pressure. Sorry about the focus. To remove the any of these 40 pin ICs. And when you do that, a quick flip, we have no plated, or we have no via damage. We have not lifted any vias off this board doing it this way. So follow my technique. Please do it this way. Don't be like those other douches who just, you'll see them take chip pullers and they'll rip 14 vias off this thing. They don't know what the hell they're doing. Try it this way. It's the safest way, and it's the fastest way. The less work you have to do after the fact to fix something is, you know, the best work that you never had to do in the first place. So let's go ahead and let's jump on the CPU, the 40-pin CPU package here, and let's evacuate that. Okay, I'm going to do a rapid removal of the CPU, and I'm going to do all of this in one take to prove a point. I can't tell you how many emails I've gotten, or I've heard people say over the years, that that's almost impossible to, you know, in one pass, especially with the NES's main board and the way the ground plane is on that thing, to remove either the PPU or CPU in one pass, that you always have to go back and you always have to do these things. Well, guess what? If you do that 15 or 20 second prep work that we did earlier, you'll remove 90% of this headache. So I want to do all this. It's going to be sped up, but it's going to be in one take just to prove a point. So here we go. One pass, one shot. Do the 15 seconds of prep work that I outlined in the beginning of this whole desoldering process, and you'll get these almost every time. And with practice, it will be every time. So, I just wanted to show that. Oh yeah. Okay, so now that all of the prep work is done on the actual AV Famicom's mainboard, let's go ahead and prep the PPU and CPU interposers. Now Jason of GameTech has already pre-assembled these for us, so there's not much we have to do other than placing the PPU and CPU in their little sockets here, adding the FFC cable, and putting some sockets on the bottom of this thing. So I'll start by adding the actual CPU to the interposer here. And there's one thing that you want to watch out for when you do this. If you look on the corner here, you'll see a little notch. This is to align to pin 1. So you see that the little notch is over here in the silk screen under this dual wipe socket. So let's look at our chip. Here's the notch on our chip. Great. So this is the proper orientation for the chip in the socket. So let's go ahead and line the chip up in the ZIF here, just like this. Make sure it rests nicely on both sides, which it does. And with gentle, even pressure, we'll start on one end, and we'll push a little bit with a little firm pressure. Then we'll go to the other end, and we'll just secure this thing down just like that. Nice and easy, nice and easy. We're in no hurry here. Just like that. And it snaps in beautifully, and that baby's ready to go. So now we'll go ahead. We'll take the flap here. This is a locking tab. Pull it out, just like this. Oh, almost just like that, just like this. And we'll take, excuse me, we'll take one of our FFC cables here, and we'll just introduce it in here just like that, with the exposed pads facing up towards the, up towards the heavens. Insert it just like that, and once you get it inserted, just simply lock each side of the tab down. And now that's done. So we've got the CPU and the CPU interposer. We've got the FFC cable connected. Let's flip it around, because now we need to install the sockets. Now, if something ever happened to this interposer, if it went bad for whatever reason, we would want to be able to quickly remove it. So we're going to socket this. Rather than hard soldering this to the main board, we're going to install sockets. Just some SIP. These are single inline packages. They are machine pinned, so they may require a little force to get on here. So what I like to do is I'll start at one end, and I'll align it just like this on one end, okay? Then I'll take my finger, and I may turn it this way. This might help. And I'll just start pushing just like that, just to get it started, not all the way down. Whoops, it fell off. Let me do that again. There we go. So I'll start, and I'll just do a little firm pressure, just like that. Okay, we get it started, right? So I'm going to come, I'm not going to go to the end, I'm just going to follow this in a progression, just like this. Just like this. Slowly progress down the chip. Down the chip. Till you get to the end here. I'm just going to lock it in, just like that. So the socket's locked. Now you can do two things here. You've got, this is an 80-pin strip, socket strip here. You can either take some flush cutters or cutters and cut the final pin off just like that right there, or you can just take your finger. For me, I just do this. Alright, and we'll apply that same process to the other side. So we'll get it started here, and we'll just push down just like that. Go on down, go on down, go on down, go on down, go on down. Here's the end. Make sure we've got nice, you don't want any gaps here, so make sure you got a nice, there you go, rigid, sturdy connection. And that's everything for the interposer preparation. Now I'm not going to do this for both. The CPU and the PPU, they're pretty symmetrical in their processes here, so what I just did for the CPU, you'll repeat for the PPU. So having said that, let's go ahead and mount this interposer into the main board, and let's solder everything up. Okay guys, so remember when I talked about the little notch here on the side that determines the orientation, or where pin 1 starts? We observed that and honored that when we assembled the interposer, or at least prepped the interposer. So remember, the notch is here, and our interposer, pin 1, has a notch there. So we'll just simply line those up, and then we'll come in here, seat it in there, hold this down, and we'll flip this baby around, and we'll get to soldering. Okay guys, once we get the CPU interposer socketed and we push that through the board here, I'm going to apply some no clean to each corner. Just a few drops is all it takes. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to load up the tip of my soldering iron, and I'm going to load it up so I can just so I can tack these four corners into place here. So I'm just going to come in here just like this. I'm going to tack, tack, tack. Oh, need a little more solder than that. And I'm going to tack right there, just like that. So we've got our corners tacked. Not secure joints, it's just holding our work in our place. Why? Again, and again, and again. We can free our hands up here. We can free our bodies. Okay, so now we're going to use a drag soldering technique that I like to do when I'm doing a lot of through holes or a lot of soldering in succession. Ideally, this is for dip packages. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to apply a little no clean, just like that. I'm going to mildly load up my my tip here. I'm going to slow my row, nice slow, consistent movement down the joints here. So observe, watch me. Okay, nice and slow. This isn't a race. And if you know drag soldering, it's as good as your speed. So you want to go nice and slow, but be consistent. Be consistent. Nice and slow. Nice and slow. It's not a race. This is just a vastly more efficient way, as far as time is concerned, to get your joints ready. So there you go. There's one side. Let's do the other side. And a lot of people will argue and say that, or a lot of people who just, in my opinion, really don't know what the hell they're talking about, will tell you that drag soldering is bad and that it's not as efficient. You don't get those thoroughly wetted joints or an as thoroughly wetted joint. That's all bullshit. You just take your time. You go slow. You let the iron and the tools and the technique do the work for you. Don't zip through it, and you'll get very, very nice joints. So again, here we go. Nice and slow here, nice and slow. Nice, consistent pace. Down the line, always introducing fresh solder. Always introducing fresh solder, just like that, just like that, just like that. And we'll finish it off just like that. So what I'll do now is I'll clean this up a bit. Just like this. I'm going to come in here. I'm gonna clean these joints off, get all this residual off of here. The MG Chemicals no clean that I use, you can buy their proprietary solvents if you look at the data sheet to do this job, but ultimately it's the same thing as high concentrated IPA or isopropyl alcohol. So that's what we'll use here, just to clean that off, and that's it. I mean, beautiful fillets, beautiful joints, and that's really all there is to that. So we'll go ahead and we'll do the I'll do the PPU off camera, and yeah, we'll be almost done. Okay, so I'm not going to show the interposer assembly on camera, but I guess I will show the soldering without commentary. So here we go. Beautiful. Okay, so now all of our main board prep is finished. We're all done there. Now we're going to get into prepping the casing and prepping the Hi-Def NES board itself for installation. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to flip this board around, and we need to zoom into this little area where the actual mechanical connector for the HDMI port mounts into this board. Let's zoom in here and let's see if we can't flush cut these blobs on the bottom to a little tighter finish. This will allow the main board itself of the Hi-Def kit to rest more flatly on the bottom of the casing. So let's go for it. Okay, I'm just going to introduce my flush cutters just like this. 1. 2. 3. Oh, sorry, bumped the camera. Damn it. And 4. Nice and flush. Okay, now that we've removed the solder blobs from the bottom of the Hi-Def board, let's go ahead and remove the bottom RF shield from the AV Famicom, because the bottom RF shield and this kit, they can't live here together. So, blop her out. Ooh! Okay, so now that we've gotten rid of that RF shield on the bottom casing here, we need to make one more modification before we can get into the serious case tooling for this HDMI port. Now you see that the Hi-Def kit actually rests between these two screw bosses right here. So it's supposed to be positioned down like this, but the problem is the corner of this board, or actually the edge of it, hits this ribbing right here. So we can see pretty well where the ribbing is and where the board extrudes and what material we need to remove. So I've done this so much that I can just simply eyeball this. So I'll take this kit out. I'll bring my cuts right in here. Cut down. Come right over here. Cut down. Once I make those cuts, I'll bend this back and forth like so. Back and forth, back and forth. Snaps right off. And now, that rib is no longer obstructing our way, so it's going to fit in there now. So we've got that taken care of. Let's get to the case tooling. Let's get to this HDMI port, which a lot of people freak out over. Okay, so we've cut our rib out here. We've removed the bottom RF shield. We're ready. We're ready to be champions. So take the Hi-Def kit out of the bottom of this thing, if it's still in there. Take it out. Position the board. We're going to mock it up here a little bit. Position the board into the bottom casing. So, we know the port is going to live here. And there are multiple different ways, there are a multitude of ways to do this. Back before this kit was made readily available, I worked with Jason quite a bit on this. I went over the install document, I did a few prototypes of this, just to see how well it flowed as far as the install goes. And through all of that, the biggest dilemma of the entire installation, of course, was the custom case tooling. So I came up with, I have a die cutting machine, so I drafted out a template to be used. So I cut a bunch of these out. I ran copies of these, but we could never find a material or a substrate that was thick enough to really go the distance. So this is for the most part on chipboard. Now this template here specifically is for a top-loading Nintendo, which is exactly the same cutout, only there's no RF module here, so there's no RF port, but it still lines up beautifully. So, and by the way, this template, this exact design, is available free to download from GameTech's website. You can email Jason directly and tell him that I sent you. But at any rate, it's there on his website. So grab this, print it out if you want to. You don't have to use this, but I highly advise it. Place it in position here. And that's pretty doggone accurate as far as the cutout that we need. So what I like to do is I like to do a very rough cut. A very rough cut initially. And what that means is I use a Dremel. I use a Dremel and I'll do a very rough slot, and then I'll shape this up with a file. So here we go. I'm going to bring my Dremel into this. I'm going to go right in the center of this. I'm going to go right in the center of this and just go across. I'm not going to go end to end. I'm just going to go right across here and just hull out a little material so I can shape this up perfectly. Well, it might not be super perfectly, but it'll look pretty darn good. Here we go. Now, I don't trust any template, and I don't trust my hands to be perfect. So, That looks pretty rough right now, but this is an excellent starting point, and this gives us plenty of leadway to shape this up beautifully with a file so we get that perfect custom fit and finish, because there's a couple things you have to take into account. No, not all kits are going to fit and rest as perfectly as one another in the bottom of this casing. You don't know how much of this material you're really taking off. How close are you getting this to the PCB when you remove these blobs? You never know. So each case is rather custom. So give yourself plenty of material to work with so you can shape this out beautifully. So what I'll do, I'm not going to do the whole port. I'm not going to do the whole port on camera, but I'm going to show you how I square things up. So I can clearly see here my lowest points, and I can see my highest points. And you know what? I may let me do a jump cut of this, and I'll zoom in. Okay, so we've zoomed in a bit here, and this might get shaky because I do have to hold this, but I can clearly see the lowest point is right here. This is probably my highest point. So I'm going to start on the bottom, and I'm going to take my file. I'm going to come right here in this corner. I'm just going to start bringing it down. Just like this, and you can already see, of course this is nowhere near finished, but you can already see this starting to level out. And as a matter of fact, if you want to, take the top off, you get a pretty good idea of what's going on here. I want to make this cut nice and plumb and as square as possible, but I don't want it to be any lower than this point right here, than this point right here. So I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to get to work. Already a vast improvement. See, the side's low. I've shaped this out so this side the right side would start riding a little high. I'm going to start bringing everything down now. Getting pretty damn square. It's very square. It's very square indeed. So let's do a quick test fit. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. So we've got just about the right, this isn't dropping in all the way, of course, because we still need to take out these two corners, but we're going to bevel these up nicely. So they're nice and beveled, but this is looking mighty nice down here. So let's shape out these corners so that this connector can fully rest in there. Let's do it. Before we go any further, you always want to stop and check, stop and check, stop and check. So we're getting really, really close on that side. Now look how tight that's becoming. So let's start working on this right side so we can evenly distribute this out. And it's going to be quite a bit on the right side. That's quite a chunk. So let's come right in here and let's hit it. That is looking pretty darn good by hand. So let's just, again, this is a rough cut. Almost. Let's just cut a bit of this steep out of here. That'll look pretty good. And we can shape this up just a little more, and we can make this look really clean all the way around. But as far as hand tools and just doing this quick and dirty, that's a pretty darn good port. So remember in the beginning of the video when I said we would come back to power later and prep the other side of the power conductor, or power and ground conductors, to deliver power from the NES board DC input jack to the Hi-Def? Well, that's exactly what we're doing now. So I went ahead and I stripped these wires, just about maybe 2 millimeters of actual jacketing, so we have about 2 millimeters of conductor material showing. I loaded up my soldering iron with some solder here, got some flux on there, and let's do it. All done. Okay guys, so now that we have the case tooling done and we've prepped the other end of our power conductors that we will be planting to the Hi-Def kit, let's go ahead and pre-tin these solder pads for voltage input and for ground. There's power. And there's ground. Okay guys, so now we have the two conductors here from the AV Famicom's input voltage from the wall and ground. Let's go ahead and secure these things. We're almost there. Okay, there's our ground. Let's just position power in there just like that. Whoop. And there's power. Wonderful. So, we're almost done here. The only thing left, flippers! Ooh, I'm gonna flip you! Okay, so very simple and very self-explanatory. We're going to take the flippers here, our FFC cables, and the PPU and CPU alignments, they just go straight to these FFC female headers here, these female ports. So let's just go ahead, pull out those locking tabs, of course, which they're pulled out, and we'll just introduce these, insert, lock each side down, done. And again right here, lock each side down, done. Perfect. Now, one final step to all of this. Jason has supplied you with foam that will attach directly to the FPGA. This will keep the kit from jostling up and down at any time, so it can't short anything or anything beautiful like that. So I'll show you how I tuck these cables in here, and we'll be done. Oh yeah, baby. Oh yeah. Okay guys, the final stretch. Reassembly. And I'm not going to do the whole reassembly. I'm just going to show you how to get nice, clean folds in these flex cables so that you can tuck them in gently and have minimal exposure out here in the open. So what I like to do is I'll slightly pick the board up, and I'll just track this cable and follow it down and follow it down. And then I'll kind of hover the board over where it's supposed to be. This will show me where the slack is in the ribbon, so I know it's about right here where my finger is. So once I find that out, I just push down. I just push down just like that. And watch that. When I do that, the cable will flex in here, and it'll disappear. It'll go to night-night land. So let's do that again. Okay, we'll get the cable in position like this. We're just going to come over to gauge how much slack. Ports are about right here. Good. We'll push down just like that. And when we do it that way, watch this. We don't have to fight these things. We don't have to do anything else other than flex them down just like that, and then bring the board into position just like so. And with a few screws here, I'll do these by hand. And remember, you always start a screw by unwinding it first. So you're matching threads for threads. You don't want to rethread these. You want to match the threads that are in these plastic bosses. And when you do that properly, these screws will go in like sweet innocence. So there it is. You're finished. That's the kit. You've done it. You're a champion. I have faith in you. I believe in you. So as always, guys, if you enjoyed this video, I really would appreciate the likes and subscribes. Any suggestions or comments down below, always read those. I love making these videos for you all, and thank you for being my friends. Lord Voultar, over and out.